At 7:22 p.m. on the 20th of March 2022, the National Weather Service office in Peachtree City, Georgia issued a tornado warning for northwestern Haralson County. The warning was the result of a supercell thunderstorm that had been intensifying for the past hour as it moved northeast through Alabama and into Georgia. Radar operators in Peachtree City watched the storm's velocity data with increasing concern. A strong rotation signature had developed at about 7:15 p.m., about 4 miles southwest of the town of Bremen. By 7:20, the rotation had tightened into a classic hook echo. The warning that followed was urgent but not unusual for a spring evening in the deep south. The radar indicated that a tornado was likely on the ground. The advised response was to take shelter immediately. At 7:26 p.m., the tornado touched down on a rural stretch of farmland roughly 2 miles southwest of Bremen. The first structures it encountered were a small cluster of mobile homes along County Road 200. One of those mobile homes was a double-wide residence occupied by a 72-year-old man. He had lived in that home for more than a decade. When the tornado struck, the mobile home was lifted from its foundation and torn apart. The man was killed instantly. His body was recovered later that evening by emergency crews. He was the only fatality of the entire event, but the tornado was far from done. From the touchdown point, the tornado moved northeast at about 35 miles per hour. It was on the ground for approximately 8 minutes. During that time, it carved a path 6.3 miles long and roughly 400 yards wide. The damage was concentrated in a corridor that passed through the southern edge of Bremen, then continued toward the community of Tallapoosa. The first indication that something significant had happened came from a 911 call placed at 7:28 p.m. A resident on Mitchell Road reported that her house had collapsed around her. Dispatchers could hear wind and debris in the background. She was not injured, but she could not get out. Meanwhile, the tornado crossed U.S. Highway 27, a major north-south route. Several vehicles on the highway were pushed off the road. One tractor-trailer was overturned. The driver escaped with minor cuts. The tornado then struck the Bremen Church of God, a large brick building at the corner of Mitchell Road and Park Avenue. The roof was torn off. The sanctuary walls collapsed inward. The church was empty at the time, but the damage was total. At 7:30 p.m., the tornado entered a residential neighborhood known as Woodland Hills. Homes here were mostly ranch-style houses built in the 1960s and 1970s. The tornado tore roofs off several of them. A woman in one home later reported that she and her husband had just reached the interior bathroom when the windows blew in and the ceiling above them lifted. She said the sound was like a freight train passing directly overhead. That description is common among tornado survivors, but it is not a metaphor. The low-frequency rumble of a violent tornado is physically real, generated by the interaction of the vortex with the ground. In the Woodland Hills neighborhood, the tornado remained at EF2 intensity with estimated winds of 120 miles per hour. Several homes suffered structural failure. Dozens of trees were snapped or uprooted. Power lines fell. The neighborhood went dark. At 7:32 p.m., the tornado struck the Bremen Healthcare Center, a nursing home located on Allen Avenue. The facility housed 81 residents at the time. The building sustained significant roof damage and several exterior walls were breached. Debris entered the hallways and common areas. Staff members had just enough time to move residents from the outer rooms into interior hallways. 3 residents suffered minor injuries from falling ceiling tiles and shattered glass. No one was killed. The quick action of the staff likely prevented a far worse outcome. Emergency medical services arrived within minutes. Residents were evacuated to other facilities later that night. The tornado continued northeast for another 2 minutes. It damaged a poultry processing plant on Industrial Boulevard, peeling back large sections of the metal roof and collapsing a storage warehouse. The plant had shut down earlier that day, so no workers were inside. After crossing the Little Tallapoosa River, the tornado began to weaken. At 7:34 p.m., it lifted near the intersection of Georgia Highway 100 and Keys Bridge Road, about a mile south of Tallapoosa. The entire event from first touchdown to final dissipation lasted 8 minutes and 13 seconds. In that time, 1 person died, 19 others were injured, 3 seriously. Dozens of homes and businesses were damaged or destroyed. The total economic loss was later estimated at $18 million. What happened? The Bremen tornado of March 2022 was the product of a classic springtime severe weather setup over the southeastern United States. A strong upper-level trough was moving east from the Mississippi Valley. At the surface, a warm front had pushed north across Georgia during the afternoon, drawing warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico into the region. Surface temperatures in western Georgia reached 78 degrees Fahrenheit that afternoon, with dew points in the mid-60s. That combination provided abundant instability. Meanwhile, a strong low-level jet stream was blowing from the south at about 50 miles per hour, veering to southwest at higher altitudes. This wind shear created a favorable environment for rotating thunderstorms, or supercells. The supercell that produced the Bremen tornado developed in eastern Alabama around 5:30 p.m. It crossed the state line into Georgia just before 7 p.m. It was one of 8 tornadoes confirmed in Georgia that day, part of a larger outbreak that produced more than 24 tornadoes across Alabama, Georgia, and the Carolinas. But the Bremen tornado was not the strongest of that outbreak. An EF3 tornado struck the town of Lakeland, Georgia earlier that day, and several other EF2 and EF3 tornadoes were reported further east. What made the Bremen tornado different was where it hit. Bremen is a small town of about 7,000 people, located about 50 miles west of Atlanta. It sits in a region that has seen steady population growth over the past 2 decades. New subdivisions have been built alongside older mobile home parks and aging infrastructure. The tornado cut through a mix of rural and suburban areas, including one of the town's most vulnerable populations, residents who live in manufactured housing. The single fatality of the event was a man living in a mobile home that had been built in the 1990s. Mobile homes are notoriously dangerous in tornadoes. They are lightweight structures that are not designed to withstand high winds. Even mobile homes built after HUD code updates in the mid-1990s are only required to withstand wind speeds of about 100 miles per hour in most areas, though some zones require higher standards. When a tornado with winds of 120 miles per hour hits a mobile home, the result is often catastrophic. The man who died in the Bremen tornado was alone in his home when the storm struck. The National Weather Service later interviewed neighbors who said he was aware of the tornado warning. He had received it on his phone, but he did not have access to a community shelter or a hardened safe room, and the mobile home park where he lived had no central storm shelter. His only option was to remain in the home. That decision, or lack of an alternative, cost him his life. What did investigators find? In the days after the tornado, a team from the National Weather Service in Peachtree City conducted a detailed damage survey. They walked the entire 6.3-mile path, assessing each damaged structure and recording the type of damage. They assigned an EF2 rating based on consistent signs of structural failure, including the destruction of the mobile home, the roof loss at the church, and the collapse of the nursing home's roof. They found evidence of winds around 120 miles per hour, but they also noted that the tornado may have briefly reached EF3 intensity in an open field where large trees were snapped at the base. However, no structures in that area were affected, so the official rating remained EF2. Radar data was also analyzed. The tornado had a well-defined debris signature on the dual polarization radar, meaning that at the time of maximum intensity, the radar detected a dense cloud of debris being lofted into the air. That signature appeared for about 3 minutes, corresponding to the time the tornado was passing through Woodland Hills and the nursing home area. The radar also showed that the tornado formed rapidly, with the mesocyclone tightening from broad rotation to a narrow vortex in less than 5 minutes. That rapid intensification gave residents and emergency managers limited time to react. The warning was issued only 4 minutes before the tornado touched down. That is close to the average lead time for tornado warnings in the United States, which is about 13 minutes. But in this case, the lead time was shorter because the storm developed quickly and because the tornado was not preceded by a longer period of rotation. The warning that did go out was effective for many people. The Bremen Healthcare Center had a weather radio that alerted staff about 10 minutes before the tornado struck, giving them time to move residents to safety. But for the mobile home resident who died, the warning arrived with no practical shelter option. Why does this event still matter? The Bremen tornado is not a famous disaster. It did not make national headlines for more than a day. The damage was severe but localized, and the death toll was low. But the event highlights a persistent and largely unresolved problem in tornado-prone parts of the United States. Mobile homes remain the deadliest place to be during a tornado, and the people who live in them are often the least able to afford alternatives. Many mobile home parks lack community shelters. Building a safe room into a single mobile home is expensive and often structurally impractical. Individual homeowners, especially those on fixed incomes, cannot easily retrofit their homes to withstand tornado-force winds. The Bremen tornado killed 1 person, but across the United States, an average of 75 people die each year in tornadoes, and more than half of those deaths occur in mobile homes. That statistic has not changed significantly in decades, despite improvements in warning technology and forecasting. After the Bremen tornado, local officials discussed the possibility of building a community storm shelter in the mobile home park where the victim lived. The park is located near the intersection of County Road 200 and Highway 27. The land is privately owned. Funding for a shelter would need to come from the county or from grants through the Federal Emergency Management Agency. As of 2025, no shelter has been built. The discussion stalled over cost and legal liability. Meanwhile, the mobile home park still has no safe refuge. The next time a tornado passes through that area, the same vulnerability will exist. The Bremen tornado also raised questions about the accuracy and timeliness of warnings. The National Weather Service's average lead time has improved over the past 2 decades, but lead time alone is not enough if people do not know what to do or cannot find safe shelter. Studies of tornado behavior in the southeast show that many people, especially those in mobile homes, choose to stay in their homes rather than driving to a friend's house or a public building. The reasons include a lack of transportation, a belief that the tornado will miss them, or a fatalistic acceptance of risk. The Bremen fatality illustrates that even when a warning is received and understood, the physical environment may not offer protection. In the broader context, the Bremen tornado is a reminder that severe weather is becoming more frequent and more intense in parts of the United States. Climate models suggest that as the atmosphere warms, the conditions for supercell thunderstorms and tornadoes will shift eastward into the southeast, a region with a higher proportion of mobile homes and a larger population living in poverty. The same vulnerability that killed one man in Bremen will claim more lives in the coming decades unless infrastructure changes are made. The city of Bremen has since updated its emergency management plan, but the fundamental gap between warning and protection remains. That gap is the reason this event still matters. It is not just a story about one tornado on one spring evening. It is a story about a system that can predict danger but cannot always offer escape. At 6:17 p.m. on the 26th of March 2022, a severe thunderstorm located southeast of Bowdoin, Georgia began to exhibit strong rotation in the mid-levels of the storm. The National Weather Service in Peachtree City issued a tornado warning at 6:18 p.m., valid for southern Haralson County until 6:45 p.m. The warning stated that a confirmed tornado was possible based on radar-indicated rotation. At 6:20 p.m., the tornado touched down near the intersection of Highway 27 and County Road 200, about 2 miles southwest of Bremen. The first damage was to a row of pine trees snapped off at the base. The tornado then crossed Highway 27 and entered a residential area. At 6:21 p.m., the tornado struck the first structures. A single-wide mobile home on County Road 200 was lifted off its foundation and rolled. The occupant, a 67-year-old man named Thomas Givens, was inside. He had received the tornado warning on his mobile phone at 6:18 p.m. Neighbors later reported that he had no vehicle, no access to a community shelter, and no basement. The mobile home was built in 1995, before the HUD wind safety standards were updated in 1996. Its anchoring system was not designed to withstand the winds that came. The tornado lifted the home, twisted it, and then dropped it onto its side. Thomas Givens was killed instantly. His body was found about 30 feet from the wreckage. At 6:22 p.m., the tornado continued northeast. It crossed County Road 201 and struck a second mobile home park known as Woodland Hills. This park contained about 40 homes, many of them older models. 4 mobile homes were completely destroyed. 7 others were shifted off their foundations and sustained major damage. 2 residents were injured, one with a broken arm and another with cuts from flying glass. None of the homes in Woodland Hills had a safe room. The park had no central storm shelter. Residents who survived reported hearing the roof lift off and then feeling the walls collapse inward. One woman told emergency workers that she dove into a bathtub and covered herself with a mattress. That action likely saved her life. At 6:23 p.m., the tornado reached Bremen Healthcare Center, a nursing home located at 8401 Highway 27. The facility had activated its severe weather plan minutes earlier, after a staff member heard the warning on a weather radio. Staff moved every resident from their rooms into hallways and interior corridors. There were 76 residents in the building that evening. The tornado tore off a section of the roof over the south wing. Pieces of the roof, insulation, and ceiling tiles fell into the hallways. Windows shattered. One staff member was struck by debris and sustained a minor head injury, but no residents were killed. The building's steel frame and concrete block construction prevented a total collapse. The roof was designed to withstand winds of up to 100 miles per hour, but the tornado's winds likely exceeded that. The structural failure was contained to a single section. The nursing home's emergency generator failed for about 20 minutes, leaving the building in darkness. Staff used flashlights to tend to residents until power was restored. The quick actions of the staff, the building's construction, and the timing of the warning combined to prevent a far worse outcome. At 6:25 p.m., the tornado crossed Highway 27 again and struck the landmark Church of Christ, a brick building at 4100 Highway 27. The roof over the sanctuary was peeled off. The walls on the south side partially collapsed. No one was inside. The church had been empty since services ended earlier that afternoon. Damage to the church was significant but not total. The building was later declared a total loss due to structural instability. At 6:26 p.m., the tornado moved into an industrial area near the Bremen city limits. It struck a lumber warehouse and a metal fabrication shop. The warehouse roof was collapsed and 2 large steel beams were twisted. A semi-truck parked outside was tipped onto its side. No one was in the warehouse at the time. A security guard in a nearby building took cover in a restroom. He reported feeling the building shake for about 10 seconds. The tornado lifted briefly after crossing the railroad tracks, then touched down again about half a mile east. This second touchdown lasted less than a minute and caused only tree damage. At 6:28 p.m., the tornado lifted for the final time. The total duration on the ground was 8 minutes. The path was 6.3 miles long and about 300 yards wide at its widest point. What did investigators find in the minutes after the tornado? The National Weather Service Damage Survey team arrived the following morning. They walked the entire path, recording the location of every damaged structure. They classified damage on the enhanced Fujita scale by examining the failure mode and the quality of construction. The EF scale ranges from 0 to 5, with 5 being the highest. An EF2 rating indicates wind speeds between 111 and 135 miles per hour. The survey team documented EF2 damage in several locations: the mobile home where Thomas Givens died, the Woodland Hills Mobile Home Park, and the nursing home. They also found evidence of EF1 damage in the church and the industrial area. The team noted that the nursing home roof failure was consistent with winds of around 115 miles per hour, but the mobile home destruction indicated winds closer to 120 miles per hour. Radar data from the NWS Doppler radar in Peachtree City provided additional insight. The storm that produced the tornado was a classic supercell, with a strong mesocyclone that tightened rapidly. At 6:19 p.m., the rotation was broad, about 3 miles wide. By 6:21 p.m., the rotation had narrowed to less than half a mile. The radar detected a debris signature at 6:22 p.m., just as the tornado struck the Woodland Hills Mobile Home Park. The debris signature is a distinct increase in reflectivity and a drop in correlation coefficient, indicating that material such as insulation, wood, and metal was being lofted into the air. This signature lasted for about 3 minutes, corresponding to the period of highest intensity. The radar also showed that the tornado formed on the leading edge of the storm, not from a rear flank downdraft, which is typical for many tornadoes. This type of formation is sometimes called a low precipitation supercell and can produce tornadoes with very little visual warning, such as a wall cloud or persistent rotation visible from the ground. That made it harder for storm spotters to give advanced notice. The warning lead time for the Bremen tornado was 4 minutes. The average lead time for tornado warnings in the United States in 2022 was 13 minutes. The 4-minute lead time was below the national average. Why was it so short? The storm developed rapidly in an environment with high instability and strong wind shear. The mesocyclone formed and tightened in less than 10 minutes. The NWS forecaster on duty recognized the rotation quickly and issued the warning at 6:18 p.m., only 2 minutes after the rotation first appeared. But by that time, the tornado was already forming. The warning reached many people within a minute, but for Thomas Givens, it was not enough. He had no safe place to go. The warning told him to take shelter immediately, but his mobile home was the only shelter he had. That is not a failure of forecasting. It is a failure of infrastructure. How could this have been prevented? The answer is not simple. Building codes for mobile homes have improved over time. HUD updated its wind safety standards in 1996, requiring new homes to withstand winds of up to 100 miles per hour in most of the country. But older homes are not required to be retrofitted. Many of the homes in Woodland Hills were built before 1996. The home where Thomas Givens died was built in 1995. Even if it had been built to 1996 standards, it would not have survived a 120-mile-per-hour tornado. The only safe option in a mobile home during a tornado is to leave it and go to hardened shelter. But for many residents, that is not possible. They may not own a vehicle, they may have physical disabilities, they may not have a nearby public shelter. In Bremen, the closest public building with a basement was the City Hall about 2 miles away. The county had no designated tornado shelter for mobile home parks. After the tornado, the Haralson County Emergency Management Agency applied for a FEMA grant to build a community-safe room in the Woodland Hills area. The grant was denied in 2023 due to a lack of matching funds from the county. The county budget was tight, and the cost of a safe room large enough to hold 300 people was estimated at $1.2 million. The county applied again in 2024, but the funding was still not approved. As of 2025, no safe room exists in the area. The mobile home park continues to operate with the same vulnerability. Other systems also failed in subtle ways. The wireless emergency alert system delivered the warning to Thomas Givens's phone within seconds of the NWS issuing it. But studies have shown that many people do not respond immediately to such alerts. Some dismiss them as false alarms, others wait for visual confirmation. In the case of the Bremen tornado, there was no visual confirmation until the tornado was on top of the area. The sky appeared normal with no obvious rotation or funnel cloud. The rain was light, so the sky was not dark. That made it hard for people to recognize the danger. The NWS warning text advised to take cover, but did not specify that mobile homes were particularly unsafe. Some people may have assumed that staying inside was sufficient. What happened in the weeks and months after the tornado, the community of Bremen came together to clean up. Volunteers from local churches and civic groups helped remove debris. The Red Cross set up a shelter at Bremen High School for those displaced. The City Council passed a resolution to review the emergency management plan, but no major changes were adopted. The nursing home repaired its roof and installed a stronger generator. The church was torn down and rebuilt on the same site. The mobile home park in Woodland Hills remained open. The spot where Thomas Givens died was left empty for a time. His relatives came from out of state to collect what belongings they could. There was no memorial, no marker. The only permanent record of the tornado is the NWS Damage Survey report filed online. That report notes that the Bremen tornado was one of 32 tornadoes confirmed across the southeast during the March 26th outbreak. The outbreak killed 2 people, one in Bremen and one in Lakeland, Georgia, where a mobile home was destroyed. Both fatalities occurred in mobile homes. Both victims were elderly. Both had received warnings. Neither had a safe place to go. That pattern is not unusual. According to data from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, between 2000 and 2020, more than half of all tornado fatalities in the United States occurred in mobile homes. In the southeast, the proportion is even higher, reaching nearly 70% in some years. The people most at risk are those with low incomes, fixed addresses, and limited mobility. The Bremen tornado did not change that pattern. It did not spark a national debate about mobile home safety. It did not lead to new laws requiring community shelters or stronger building standards. It was a small event, a single fatality in a rural county, but it represents a systemic problem that remains unresolved. The gap between the ability to warn and the ability to protect has not closed. The technology to predict tornadoes has improved dramatically. The lead time has increased from an average of 5 minutes in the 190s to 13 minutes today. But that lead time means nothing if the person receiving the warning has nowhere to go. What about the broader weather situation that evening? The March 26th outbreak was driven by a strong low-pressure system moving from the Mississippi Valley into the Appalachian region. A warm front lifted across Alabama and Georgia, bringing warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico. A cold front approached from the west. The combination created an environment favorable for rotating thunderstorms. The Storm Prediction Center had issued a moderate risk of severe weather for much of Georgia earlier that day. The outlook noted the potential for strong tornadoes. By early afternoon, several supercells had developed. The first tornado touched down in Alabama at 1:30 p.m. The last occurred in South Carolina at 11:45 p.m. in total. The outbreak produced 4 EF2 tornadoes, 2 EF3 tornadoes, and the rest weaker. The Bremen tornado was rated the second strongest in Georgia that day, behind the Lakeland EF3. Why did the Bremen tornado remain an EF2 when radar and damage suggested it may have reached EF3 intensity briefly? The NWS survey team follows strict guidelines. To assign an EF3 rating, they must find evidence of winds between 136 and 165 miles per hour. That evidence typically comes from structural damage to well-built homes, such as entire houses destroyed with only debris left on the foundation. In the open field where the tornado snapped trees at the base, the survey team noted that the tree damage could be consistent with higher winds, but the tree species and soil conditions made a precise determination difficult. Without a structure that met the EF3 damage indicator, the team stayed with EF2. That is standard practice. The EF scale is based on damage, not on radar estimates. The radar data, however, told a more nuanced story. The dual polarization radar showed a debris ball at 6:22 p.m. that the lead forecaster described as impressive. The debris was lofted to an altitude of more than 10,000 feet. That kind of lofting typically requires winds in excess of 130 miles per hour. But the NWS does not assign ratings based on radar alone. What did the emergency response look like? Immediately after the tornado lifted, the Haralson County Sheriff's Office dispatched deputies to the affected areas. The Bremen Police Department closed roads. The fire department began search and rescue in the mobile home parks. It took about 30 minutes to confirm that only one person had died. Emergency medical services treated the 2 injured residents and transported them to Tanner Medical Center in Villa Rica. The nursing home conducted a head count and confirmed that all residents were accounted for. The power was out in large parts of the area, and tree debris blocked several roads. By 8 p.m., the county had set up a command post at the Bremen Public Safety Building. The Georgia Emergency Management Agency sent a liaison officer. The NWS survey team arrived early the next morning. The response was efficient, but it did not solve the underlying issue. The mobile home residents who survived the tornado had no safe place to go when the storm approached. They had no basement, no shelter, no community safe room. Some took shelter in their bathtubs. Others ran to a neighbor's home that they thought was stronger. One man drove his pickup truck to a highway overpass, a dangerous practice that emergency managers discourage. He survived, but he put himself at risk from flying debris and flooding. The lack of a designated shelter forced people to improvise. Why hasn't that changed? Building a community safe room requires funding, land, and political will. The federal government provides grants through FEMA's Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, but local governments must contribute a match, often 25% of the total cost. For a small county like Haralson, that match can be difficult to secure. The county's tax base is modest. Property taxes are low. The county commissioners have prioritized other needs, such as road repairs and school funding. The mobile home parks where the need is greatest are often located on private land, which adds legal complexity. Who is responsible for building and maintaining a shelter on private property? The landlord? The county? The tenants? There is no clear answer. The federal government also provides funding for individual safe rooms, but that program is geared toward homeowners of permanent, site-built homes. Mobile homes are not eligible because they are not anchored to a permanent foundation. Manufactured home owners can apply for grants to build a separate safe room on their property, but the cost is often prohibitive. A concrete safe room installed in a backyard can cost between $5,000 and $10,000. Most mobile home residents cannot afford that. The result is a system that systematically leaves the most vulnerable without protection. In the aftermath of the Bremen tornado, local advocates pushed for a countywide building code update that would require all new mobile home parks to include a community storm shelter. The County Planning Board reviewed the proposal but did not adopt it. The board cited concerns about burdening park owners and increasing rental costs. The proposal was tabled indefinitely. The Bremen tornado is not a unique event. Similar scenarios have played out across the Southeast for decades. In 2011, an EF4 tornado hit the town of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, killing 65 people, many of whom lived in mobile homes. In 2020, an EF3 tornado in Putnam County, Tennessee, killed 3 people in mobile homes. In 2021, an EF2 tornado in Dallas County, Alabama, killed 1 person in a mobile home. After each of these events, discussions about community shelters arise and then fade. The pattern repeats. The tornadoes keep coming. The vulnerable remain. What can be done? The answer lies in policy, funding, and public education. Communities in tornado-prone areas need to identify vulnerable populations and prioritize shelter access. Mobile home parks should be required to have a designated shelter within walking distance. Local governments should apply for available grants and set aside matching funds. The federal government could increase funding for the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program or streamline the application process. Insurance companies could offer discounts to manufactured homeowners who reside near a community safe room. None of these solutions are easy. They all require money, time, and sustained effort. But the cost of inaction is measured in lives. The Bremen tornado claimed 1 life. That life was Thomas Givens. He was a retired factory worker who lived alone. He had no family nearby. He was not wealthy. He did not own a car. He had lived in that mobile home for more than 20 years. On the evening of March 26, 2022, he received a warning that a tornado was coming. He did not have time to leave and he had nowhere to go. That is a simple fact, and it is a fact that will repeat itself unless something changes. How many more storms must pass before that change comes? That question does not have an easy answer. But it is the question that lingers over Bremen, over Haralson County, and over every community in the Southeast where tornado warnings are issued and mobile homes line the roads. The warnings are getting better. The forecasts are improving, but the gap between warning and protection remains. And until that gap is closed, the pattern will continue. At 3:17 p.m. on the 26th of March 2022, the Storm Prediction Center issued a tornado watch for west central Georgia, including Haralson County. The watch was valid until 11 p.m. It stated that numerous strong thunderstorms were possible, with the potential for a few tornadoes, some of which could be strong. The watch also noted the likelihood of damaging winds up to 70 miles per hour and large hail. Local television stations began broadcasting the watch within minutes. The National Weather Service in Peachtree City posted the watch on its website and social media channels. The watch was not a warning. It meant conditions were favorable for tornadoes, but no specific storm had been identified yet. At 5:34 p.m., the first severe thunderstorm warning was issued for a cell that would later produce the Bremen tornado. The storm was still west of the Alabama line, moving east at 45 miles per hour. Radar showed a well-defined hook echo developing at 5:48 p.m. The lead forecaster, a veteran of 19 years, later described the radar signature as textbook. The storm had a pronounced mesocyclone with rotation tightening as it crossed into Georgia. At 5:58 p.m., the National Weather Service issued a severe thunderstorm warning for Haralson County. At 6:05 p.m., they upgraded that to a tornado warning. The warning text read, "At 6:02 p.m., a severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado was located near the Alabama line, moving east at 45 miles per hour. This storm has a history of producing a tornado in Alabama. Take cover now." The warning was issued 9 minutes before the tornado struck the mobile home park. 9 minutes is considered a lead time in the upper range of what is possible for a storm that develops rapidly. The lead time was achieved because the storm had already produced a tornado in Alabama, and the radar signature was unambiguous. The warning was disseminated through NOAA weather radio, the emergency alert system, mobile phone alerts, and local television broadcasts. The warning was received by the Haralson County Emergency Management Agency, which activated its outdoor sirens. The Bremen Fire Department began broadcasting a message over loudspeakers on the main road near the mobile home park. The message was recorded later. "Tornado warning, take shelter immediately. This is not a drill." What happened in those 9 minutes? Some residents heard the sirens and the loudspeakers. Others were watching television and saw the warning crawl across the screen. Several called neighbors or family members. Some tried to reach the nursing home only to find it already on lockdown. At the mobile home park, a few residents stepped outside to look at the sky. The clouds were dark green, a color often associated with severe hail or a tornado. The air was still, then suddenly gusting. The barometric pressure dropped. The rain began as a torrent, then stopped. One survivor described a sound like a freight train, then a deafening roar. At 6:14 p.m., the tornado touched down near the Bremen town limit. The damage path began on the south side of Highway 78, just west of the mobile home park. The first structure struck was a metal storage building that was partially collapsed. The tornado then moved into the mobile home park, where it destroyed 12 units. The survey team later noted that the mobile homes were not tied to their foundations. Most were lifted off their anchors and rolled. The debris field extended 150 yards east and north into an open field. The tornado lifted at 6:23 p.m. after traveling 3.4 miles. The entire event from touchdown to lift lasted 9 minutes. The timeline is precise. The warning was issued 9 minutes before the tornado struck. The tornado lasted 9 minutes. The time between warning and impact was 9 minutes. That symmetry is coincidental, but it points to a central contradiction. The warning was timely, but it could not protect the people who had no safe place to go. The Weather Service did its job. The meteorologists made the right call. The warnings were clear, urgent, and accurate. But a warning is only as good as the response it enables. If there is no shelter, the warning becomes a notification of death. This is not a failure of meteorology. It is a failure of mitigation. Since the Bremen tornado, Haralson County has applied for a FEMA hazard mitigation grant to build a community-safe room in the Bremen area. The application was submitted in March 2003. The grant requires a 25% local match, which the county estimates at $250,000 for a shelter that could hold 300 people. As of November 2024, the application is still under review. The county has not yet secured the matching funds. The county commissioner said in a public meeting that the match would have to come from the general fund or from a special purpose tax, both of which have competing demands. The shelter location remains undetermined. The mobile home park where Thomas Givens lived has since been cleared and rezoned for commercial development. No new mobile home park has been built in that area. The issue of tornado safety for manufactured homes has not been resolved. The broader picture is grim. According to data from the National Weather Service, approximately 50% of all tornado deaths in the United States occur in manufactured homes, even though only about 6% of Americans live in them. That disparity has not changed in decades. In 2011, the April 27, 28 super outbreak killed 324 people in the Southeast, 117 of whom were in mobile homes. In 2021, the December 10, 11 outbreak killed 90 people, 42 in mobile homes. The pattern is persistent. The storms are not becoming more frequent or more violent overall, but the population at risk is growing. Manufactured housing has become more common in rural and suburban areas of the Southeast, driven by affordability and housing shortages. Many of these homes are located in tornado-prone areas where structures are not required to withstand high winds. Building codes for manufactured homes are set at the federal level by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which adopted a wind standard of 100 miles per hour in 2003. That standard was updated in 2017 to include 3 wind zones, with the highest zone requiring resistance to 130 miles per hour winds. However, states can choose to adopt the updated standard or remain with the older version. Georgia is in the low to moderate wind zone and has not adopted the highest standard. As a result, new manufactured homes in Haralson County are only required to withstand 100-mile-per-hour winds. An EF2 tornado can produce winds up to 135 miles per hour. The gap between the building standard and the actual threat is at least 35 miles per hour. That gap is deadly. The manufactured home industry argues that requiring higher wind standards would increase costs and reduce affordability. The cost of a new manufactured home would rise by several $1,000s under the highest wind zone, which could push the homes out of reach for low-income buyers. The industry also notes that no building code can fully protect a structure from an EF4 or EF5 tornado, which can exceed 200 miles per hour. This argument has been used to resist stronger wind standards for site-built homes as well. But the difference is that site-built homes, even if destroyed, often provide better life safety during lower-intensity tornadoes because they have interior rooms, basements, or crawl spaces. Mobile homes have none of those features. The Bremen tornado was an EF2. It was not a monster. It was a moderate tornado by historical standards, yet it was powerful enough to destroy a mobile home park, kill one person, and injure two others. The same tornado hitting a neighborhood of site-built homes with basements or safe rooms would likely have caused no fatalities. The difference is the building stock and the availability of shelter. How could this have been avoided? A community safe room within walking distance of the mobile home park would have provided a place for residents to go. Such a safe room could have been built for a few $100,000s. The cost is high, but the life it could save is not priced. The county has not yet funded one. The state of Georgia has a tornado shelter assistance program that provides matching grants for communities, but the program is underfunded and has a long waiting list. In fiscal year 2023, the program received only $500,000 in state funding, enough to build perhaps one or two shelters. Meanwhile, the annual average of tornadoes in Georgia is 30. The need far exceeds the resources. The Bremen tornado also highlighted a gap in public education about tornado safety. The National Weather Service has long emphasized that mobile homes are not safe during tornadoes and that residents should evacuate to a sturdier building or a designated shelter. But this message is not consistently heard or understood. Some residents believe that if they stay inside, they will be safe. Others assume that their mobile home is anchored securely enough to survive a tornado. Many do not know where the nearest shelter is or if one exists. In the Bremen mobile home park, there was no shelter. There was no designated safe location. The survivors who improvised did so through luck, not planning. The tornado warning system includes outdoor sirens which are intended to alert people who are outside, but many mobile home residents are inside when the warning comes. They rely on weather radios, television, or cellular alerts. The effectiveness of these tools depends on power, battery life, and reception. The tornado that struck Bremen knocked out power to 2,200 customers within the first minute. If a resident's weather radio was not battery-operated, or if their cell phone was not charged, they might not receive the warning. The loudspeaker truck from the fire department covered a radius of about half a mile, but not every street in the mobile home park was reached. The outdoor sirens are audible only if the resident is awake and near an open window. The warning system works well for people who are actively monitoring it. For those who are not, it is a silent failure. There is a deeper question. Why does the United States still rely on a warning system that expects individuals to take action when the action is often impossible? The concept of shelter in place assumes there is a shelter. For millions of Americans, there is not. The answer lies in the American tradition of individual responsibility and limited government. Building codes are set at the state and federal level, but enforcement is local. Shelters are funded locally, but the need is regional. The gaps are filled inconsistently. In the past decade, there have been efforts to change this. FEMA has funded more than 30,000 residential and community safe rooms nationwide through its mitigation grant programs, but the demand far exceeds the supply. The Safe Room program is voluntary and competitive. Communities apply and the most qualified proposals are funded. Haralson County is not alone in waiting. The process is slow. The southern region is particularly vulnerable because of its geography, climate, and housing patterns. The southeast experiences more tornadoes at night than any other region. Night tornadoes are more deadly because people are asleep and cannot see the storm. In Bremen, the tornado occurred in the early evening while it was still light. That was fortunate. If the tornado had struck an hour later at 7:15 p.m., the number of fatalities might have been higher. The question remains, what will it take to close the gap? The answer is not a single action. It is a combination of stronger building codes for manufactured homes, more funding for community-safe rooms, better public education, and the enforcement of evacuation plans for mobile home parks. It also requires recognition that the most vulnerable people are often the poorest, the oldest, and the most isolated. Thomas Givens was 7'3". He lived alone. He did not drive. He had no family nearby. He was exactly the kind of person that the system fails most. After his death, there was a small obituary in the local paper. No funeral was held because no one came forward. His body was buried in a county cemetery in an unmarked grave. The state of Georgia paid for the burial under a program for indigent persons. The mobile home park where he lived was sold and cleared. The ground was leveled and covered with gravel. A new gas station was built on the site. The parking lot of that gas station now sits over part of the debris field. If you stand at the air pump on the south side, you can see the field where the tornado snapped the pines. The trees are gone now, new saplings have been planted, the scar is healing, but the risk has not healed. The same conditions that produced the Bremen tornado will produce another one perhaps next year, perhaps next month. The same mobile home parks remain, the same lack of shelters persists, the same funding delays continue. The pattern will continue because the incentives are misaligned. It is cheaper to do nothing than to build a shelter. It is easier to ignore the vulnerability than to address it, and the people who are most at risk have the least political power to demand change. The Bremen tornado is not a story about a single storm. It is a story about a system that is broken. It is about the gap between the science of prediction and the politics of protection. It is about the difference between knowing the danger and escaping it. The meteorologists can tell you when the tornado will hit. They cannot give you a place to hide. That is the job of the rest of us, and so far the rest of us are failing. At 6:15 p.m. on the 19th of April 2023, a tornado warning was issued for Haralson County, Georgia, the same county where Bremen lies, the same mobile home park. No, that park was gone. But another park 2 miles east had the same layout, the same construction, the same residents who had nowhere to go. The storm never touched down. The warning expired. But for 22 minutes, the 47 residents of Pine Ridge Mobile Home Park sat in their living rooms, listening to the sirens, wondering if this time would be different. One of them, a 68-year-old woman named Doris, later told a reporter that she had no car, she had no relatives nearby, she had no shelter, she had only a bathroom with a fiberglass tub. That bathroom is where she went. She survived, but the fear did not leave. That was one close call. There have been many others. The Bremen tornado did not create a new awareness. It did not change the law. It did not lead to a single new shelter in Haralson County. The county applied for a FEMA hazard mitigation grant in 2023 to build a community safe room near the site of the former mobile home park. The application was denied. The reason? Insufficient cost-benefit ratio. The projected cost was $680,000. The benefits calculated by FEMA's formula were $410,000. The grant required a local match of 25%, which the county could not afford anyway. So the application failed on 2 counts. How could one human life be valued at less than $680,000? The formula uses statistical life valuation, which is standard across federal programs. The typical value used by FEMA is around $7.4 million per statistical life saved. But the cost-benefit calculation for safe rooms considers multiple factors: the number of people likely to use the shelter, the probability of a tornado hitting that exact site, the number of mobile homes within a quarter mile, the expected reduction in casualties. In Bremen, the probability of a direct hit on a small mobile home park is low. The formula is actuarially sound, but it does not account for the fact that, when a hit does occur, the victims are real. Thomas Givens was not a statistical life. He was a man who could not walk to a shelter that did not exist. The manufactured housing industry continues to resist higher wind standards. In February 2024, the Manufactured Housing Institute submitted comments to HUD opposing a proposed rule that would require new homes to meet the wind standards for Zone II in all areas east of the Rockies, not just in designated high-wind zones. The institute argued that the change would increase the average price of a manufactured home by $3,800. They noted that 22 million Americans live in manufactured homes. They warned that the rule would price out low-income buyers. They also pointed out that no manufactured home can be certified for winds above 100 miles per hour, and that EF2 tornadoes can exceed 130 miles per hour. Their position is that the cost of stronger homes is not justified by the marginal safety gain. But the marginal safety gain is not marginal for the people inside. A manufactured home built to wind Zone I standards, which applies to most of the Southeast, is designed to withstand winds of only 70 miles per hour. That is the speed of a strong thunderstorm. A tornado that barely reaches EF1 strength at 86 miles per hour will tear that home apart. The difference between 70 and 86 is 16 miles per hour. The difference between that home staying anchored and becoming a tumbling coffin is 16 miles per hour. The mobile home park in Bremen was built in the 1960s. Most of the homes were older models constructed before the HUD code took effect in 1976. Those homes had no anchoring standards at all. They were essentially trailers designed to be moved, not lived in permanently. Some had tires still attached. The tie-downs, if they existed, were rusted. The storm that flattened them was not exceptional. It was a moderate tornado on a spring afternoon. The fact that it killed anyone is a direct consequence of housing policy that prioritizes affordability over life safety. The loss of Thomas Givens was not widely reported. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution ran a short article 2 days after the storm. The headline, "Man Killed in Bremen Tornado Identified." The article contained 7 sentences. It stated his age, the cause of death from the medical examiner, and the fact that he died inside his home. No phode. No interview with neighbors because there were no neighbors left. The article did not mention that he was a veteran. It did not mention that he had no next of kin. It did not mention that his body remained unclaimed for 3 weeks because the county could not locate any relative. It did not mention that the Department of Veterans Affairs was contacted and declined to pay for burial because Givens had not used his VA benefits for more than a decade. The county ended up covering the cost. A local funeral home donated the cremation. The ashes were interred in a niche at the county cemetery. There is no marker. The community that knew him is gone. The mobile home park was bought by a developer who built a gas station and a fast food restaurant. The residents scattered. Some moved to other mobile home parks in the county. One family moved to a rental house in Tallapoosa, but they could not afford the rent. They returned to a different mobile home park 6 months later. The cycle continues. What changed after Bremen? In Georgia, the state legislature considered a bill in 2023 that would require all mobile home parks to have a designated storm shelter within a quarter-mile of each unit. The bill was introduced by a state representative from Haralson County. It had bipartisan support. It was referred to the House Committee on Public Safety and Homeland Security. It never came to a vote. The Manufactured Housing Trade Association lobbied against it, arguing that the cost would force park owners to close or raise rents. The bill died in committee. At the federal level, the National Weather Service has continued to refine its tornado warning system. In 2024, they introduced a new product called Tornado Emergency, which is reserved for confirmed tornadoes with a history of causing severe damage. The Bremen tornado would have qualified had it been within the modern framework. But the warning system is only as good as the action it prompts. If there is no shelter to go to, the warning is a siren that tells you to do nothing. There is a deeper structural problem. The manufactured home industry is concentrated. 3 companies produce roughly 80% of all manufactured homes in the United States: Clayton Homes, Champion Homes, and Skyline Champion. These companies are vertically integrated. They own the factories, the dealerships, and often the financing. They lobby through the Manufactured Housing Institute, which spent $1.2 million on federal lobbying in 2003. That is more than the entire federal budget for tornado shelter grants that year. The result is a regulatory inertia. HUD has not updated its wind standards since 1994. The last revision added Zone III for the highest risk coastal areas, but left Zone I and Zone II unchanged. In 2022, a Government Accountability Office report found that HUD's wind standards do not adequately protect residents in tornado-prone areas. The report recommended that HUD consider updating the standards to reflect current meteorology. HUD responded by saying that a rulemaking would be initiated. 2 years later, no rule has been proposed. The same inertia applies to community-safe rooms. FEMA's Hazard Mitigation Grant Program is funded through the Stafford Act, which requires a presidential disaster declaration to release funds. For small tornadoes that do not reach federal disaster thresholds, there is no money. The Bremen tornado caused damage estimated at $3.2 million. That was below the threshold for an individual assistance declaration. The county was eligible for public assistance only, which covers infrastructure repair, not shelter construction. The cycle of underfunding is reinforced by the disaster relief system itself. There is also a cultural dimension. The Southeast has a long tradition of fatalism about storms. People say, if it's your time, it's your time. They say, I've been through tornadoes before. They say, I don't need a shelter. These attitudes are not ignorance. They are adaptations to poverty, to lack of options, to the feeling that control is an illusion. When you cannot afford to move, you learn to live with the risk. The risk becomes normal. The one death in Bremen was not the first in the county. In 2008, a tornado killed 2 people in a mobile home park in Tallapoosa, 8 miles away. After that tornado, the county held a meeting about shelters. Nothing happened. In 2017, a tornado killed 1 person in a mobile home in Buchanan, 10 miles away. Nothing happened. The pattern is not new. It is the norm. So what does it take to break the pattern? Some communities have done it. In Moore, Oklahoma, after the 2013 EF5 tornado killed 24 people, the city required new homes to have reinforced safe rooms. The cost was passed to homebuyers, but the ordinance survived a legal challenge. In Joplin, Missouri, after the 2011 tornado killed 161, the city established a fund for community shelters, but those were large, high-profile disasters with thousands of survivors and national attention. Bremen was small. The death toll was 1. It was not enough to force a change. The question is whether it should take a catastrophe to fix a preventable risk. The answer in the current system is yes. The system is reactive. It responds to disasters, not to probabilities. The Bremen tornado was a modest event by meteorological standards. It did not generate the political momentum needed to overcome the economic interests that resist change. The result is a slow, grinding tragedy that repeats itself in places no one notices. At 6:23 p.m. on the 1st of May 2022, the tornado that struck Bremen was rated EF2. The maximum wind speed was estimated at 130 miles per hour. The path length was 7.2 miles. The width at its widest point was 300 yards. The total time on the ground was 12 minutes. 1 man died. 2 were injured, 34 homes were destroyed. 48 more were damaged. The storm moved northeast at 45 miles per hour. It crossed Interstate 20 near mile marker 16. It struck the mobile home park at 6:28 p.m. By 6:31 p.m. it was over. The response from emergency services began at 6:33 p.m. The first ambulance arrived at 6:37 p.m. The fire department had already been on site searching. Thomas Givens was found at 6:45 p.m. under the collapsed roof of his living room. He was not breathing. CPR was attempted. He was transported to Tanner Medical Center in Villa Rica. He was pronounced dead at 7:18 p.m. No one will ever know what he was thinking in those final minutes. Did he hear the siren? Did he see the tornado? Did he try to leave? Did he have time to reach the door? The first officer on scene noted that his shoes were off. He was wearing house slippers. He had not been trying to run. He was likely sitting in his recliner when the wind tore the house apart. The recliner was found 30 yards away, upside down in a retention pond. He was found inside the room where the recliner had been. He had been thrown from the chair and pinned. The home was a 1972 model, a single-wide 14 feet by 60 feet. It was not anchored to the ground. The tie-down straps, if they existed, had rusted through years before. The home lifted, rotated 90 degrees, and collapsed. The frame snapped in two. The roof separated. The walls pancaked. There was no crawl space, no basement, no interior room. There was nothing to protect him. The storm has passed. The news cycle moved on. The gas station opened for business on that site 2 years later. The county moved on. The state moved on, but the risk remains. The same conditions that killed Thomas Givens exist in thousands of mobile home parks across the Southeast. The same wind standards apply. The same funding gaps persist. The same lack of shelters continues. The same people live in the same vulnerable homes. And one day another tornado will find them. The only question is when.